أعتقد نبتدي.
ممكن نبدأ.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام
السادة
عليكم
الح-
ورحمة الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السادة المشاركين، الأخوة الخبراء المشاركين في هذه السلسلة والندوة من سلسلة 90 دقيقة من المعرفة التربوية التي ينظمها المركز الإقليمي للتخطيط التربوي من أجل تبادل المعرفة وتبادل أهم النتائج الإصدارات التي يقوم بها المركز مع شركائه من الاستراتيجيين. وهنا شريكنا في هذا الموضوع جامعة أبو ظبي، نتقدم لهم بالشكر. آه، ونرحب بكافة المشاركين والخبراء الذين سيقدمون المحاضرات والورش والمحاضرات خلال هذه السلسلة، ونثمن جهودهم وتفانيهم في توفير الدعم والمساندة لنا في مثل هذه الورش التي نسعى منها بإفادة الجميع المشاركين وجميع المستفيدين من قطاع التعليم. الأخوة الأفاضل والأخوات، تعلمون أن التعليم الجيد هو مفتاح التنمية الشاملة والمستدامة، وهو الأساس لبناء مجتمعات قوية ومزدهرة. لذا فإن تأمين تعليم عالي الجودة لجميع الطلبة بما في ذلك الطلبة ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة يعد من الأولويات الرئيسية للمجتمعات المسؤولة. فالتعليم يمنح الفرد المعرفة والمهارات الضرورية لتطوير ذاته وتحقيق إمكانياته الكاملة، كما أنه يساهم في بناء مهاراته مثل القدرة على التفكير بشكل نقدي وحل المشكلات واتخاذ القرارات في مختلف مجالات الحياة. بالإضافة لذلك يعزز التعليم ثقة الفرد في نفسه وفي إمكانياته لتحقيق أهدافه الشخصية والمهنية، ويعتبر أيضا محركا أساسيا للتنمية الاقتصادية من حيث تحسين مستوى الإنتاجية وتطوير القوى العاملة المؤهلة، وذلك يعزز الابتكار والنمو الاقتصادي في المجتمعات والدول، ويساهم في بناء مجتمعات قوية اقتصاديا ومتعددة الثقافات تتميز بالتعايش السلمي مبنية على قيم التسامح والاحترام المتبادل بين أفراد المجتمع. وعلى الرغم من أن نعلم جميعا أهمية التعليم بأنه ضرورة ملحة وحق أساسي من حقوق الإنسان، وبغض النظر عن الظرف الذي يعيشه، فإن المصطلح التعليم في ظل الأزمات والطوارئ مصطلح يعتبر حديثا نسبيا يأتي ضمن الهدف الرابع من أهداف التنمية المستدامة، والذي يؤكد على ضمان التعليم الجيد المنصف الشامل للجميع، وتعزيز فرص التعلم مدى الحياة للجميع بكل أطيافهم، كل فئات المجتمع بكل أطيافها. ومع العلم أنه ثم أكثر من 25 مليون حاليا خارج إطار المدرسة في المناطق التي تتعرض للحروب والنزاعات والاحتلالات والكوارث الطبيعية، سواء كانوا أفراد طلبة أصحاء أو طلبة ذوي احتياجات خاصة. أما في جائحة كورونا فقد وقع حق الجميع الأطفال في التعليم تحت التهديد في كل مكان وفي الوقت نفسه، ولكن بنسب متفاوتة، وتأثر بالأخص الطلبة الأكثر فقرا وذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة. ولكن هذا ساهم في فتح الكثير من أبواب الحوار والتفكير المبتكر حول كيفية تقديم الدعم للطلبة في أوقات الأزمات. ونحن مطالبون بفهم هذه التحديات التي واجهها الطلبة ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة، وبتقديم الحلول الفعالة لضمان استمرارية تعليمهم ونموهم الشامل، سواء في وقت الأزمات أو خارج وقت الأزمات. هذه الندوة تعتبر فرصة لتبادل الأفكار والخبرات وبناء رؤى جديدة لضمان أن كل طالب يحصل على التعليم الذي يستحقه. وفي الختام نود أن نشجع المؤسسات التعليمية وأفراد المجتمع على الانخراط بفعالية في دعم الطلبة ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة، لأن دورهم حاسم في بناء مجتمع يحترم التنوع ويسعى لتحقيق العدالة التعليمية للجميع. نشكر لكم تواجدكم وتفاعلكم ومشاركاتكم، ونتمنى للجميع جلسة مثمرة ومفيدة. ونود الآن أن نترك الفرصة للأستاذ الدكتور غانم البسطامي الذي سوف يدير هذه الجلسة. والأستاذ غانم نشكره على تواجده معنا، فهو خبير في هذا المجال، حاصل على دكتوراه في علم النفس والتنمية وماجستير في قياس التربية والنفس ودبلوم متقدم في التربية الخاصة والتأهيل وبكالوريوس في علم النفس. ويعمل الأستاذ الدكتور البسطامي كأستاذ في علم النفس والقيادة والتربية الخاصة في العديد من الجامعات، انضم إلى جامعة أبو ظبي منذ عام 2005. وقد قام الأستاذ الدكتور غانم بنشر أكثر من 65 ورقة علمية وبحث وست كتب وفصول، كما قدم أكثر من 100 ورقة في العديد من المؤتمرات الوطنية والدولية، وقاد العديد من المشاريع ووضع العديد من الأدلة في مجالات متنوعة مثل علم النفس والتربية وبرامج بناء القدرات وتحضير المعلمين والتربية الخاصة وتنمية المجتمع وبرامج الطفولة المبكرة. فضلا عن تطوير المناهج وبرامج التطوير المهني وتعزيز الهيئات، عمل أيضا كمدير برنامج واستشاري في العديد من المنظمات الدولية مثل البنك الدولي، اليونسكو، والحكومات والدول الإقليمية. ونحن نؤكد أن وجوده بيننا سوف يثري هذه الندوة بإذن الله. تفضل دكتور غانم.
كل الشكر والتقدير أستاذتنا الفاضلة مهرة، أسعد الله أوقاتك، وشكرا جزيلا لهذه التقدمة، وشكرا لكلمتك المميزة الحقيقة في إعطاء الضوء وتسليط الضوء على أهمية تطوير التعليم والارتقاء، وبخاصة عندما نتعامل مع الفئات الأقل حظا أو التي تحتاج إلى مزيد من الدعم. Allow me to start welcoming my colleagues here, our guests and our speakers, distinguished speakers in this forum, which is, as Ms. Mahra mentioned, continuous 90 minutes of knowledge series, and this is one of the important series in this matter, focusing and giving attention about really very critical area and field and category in the community in all countries, especially these countries suffering now from a lot of crisis and problems. We'd like to welcoming our guests and distinguished speakers. Let me quickly introduce to you our guests and the speakers. Start with Dr. Muhammad Fatiha. Dr. Muhammad Fatiha is director of Al Ain campus, Abu Dhabi University, and he is associate professor in special education. Dr. Muhammad Fatiha, really very distinguished person in the area of special education. He have publishing a lot of research and papers and projects in this area. And Dr. Muhammad Fatiha also expert in the area of autism and in the area of planning and developing manuals, programs, research to serve people with special need of determination. My second speaker for today, Dr. Muhammad Al-Rashaidi. Dr. Muhammad Al-Rashaidi, PhD holding in special education from Spain, which is having some different approach from the familiar areas and universities. Dr. Muhammad Al-Rashaidi, assistant professor working in the Department of Special Education and University of United Arab Emirates, one of the biggest and first federal university in the country, and they have a big department of special education start from 3 decades at least, based on my knowledge. Dr. Rashid also having a lot of scholarship and the grants and publish a lot of research in the area of special education. I have also to welcome our distinguished guests from different universities and countries. Let me start with Professor Muayyad Al-Hamidi from Jordan. Dr. Professor Muayyad is professor in the Arab Open University, the Department of Educational Sciences. Dr. Hamidi, he specialized in the area of special education, and he works in different programs and holding a lot of initiatives. My second distinguished guest, Dr. Inas Alves, most welcome and happy to having you here with us today. Yes, Dr. Inas, Associate Professor in Inclusive Education at the School of Education. Dr. Inas specialized in especially in inclusive education. Yes, inclusive education, as you know, very important area, and it becomes like a mandatory approach. It is a must to follow and to apply by all organizations, especially in the area of education. Dr. Inas works at the University of Glasgow, and she leads a lot of programs, especially in the inclusive education, a lot of resources and research and policies in this area. She has a PhD in education from University of Manchester at UK. Happy to be with us, Dr. Inas. My third distinguished guest, Dr. Lo Sao. Lo Sao Chong, Professor and former head of Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling. Very interesting area. Professor Lo Chang received her bachelor in special education, and she has also master degree in educational psychology. Currently, she is a full professor and former head of department for the Department of Educational Psychology and Counseling in the University Malaysia. Dr. Lo, most welcome and happy having you with us today in this series and this discussion. Most welcome, all of you, my distinguished guests and speakers. Let me quickly just mention two important points about our structure for today's series and discussion. I will start and invite, of course, my distinguished speakers, Dr. Fatiha and Dr. Rashaida, to present their conclusion about their findings, and then move to our distinguished guests, Dr. Inas and Dr. Professor Hamadi and Dr. Lo, to give their also short presentation about and give their feedback about the paper and about the topic. Let me also, before we start, remind our participants, most welcome to our participants, and we are really happy to see this big number sharing and participating and joining us in this series. We have more than 120 actually participants. You can, of course, at the end, we have like 10 to 15 minutes to ask questions, and you can send your questions in chatting box, okay, and or under question and answer box. Our subject today about the policies, actually. Policies related to support and to improve the people of determination and the special need people, especially during the pandemic or some special circumstances or some special conditions. This research actually titled Intervention on policies level to ensure the continuous learning of special needs students during emergencies, which is mean not limited to only pandemic or similar, any other conditions caused emergency called. So what to respond, how to respond? We need to hear from our speakers about their findings and their recommendation. Most welcome, and asking kindly Dr. Muhammad Fatiha, please.
Thank you, Professor Ghani, for the introduction. I'll be sharing my presentation. I hope it's clear.
Yes.
Yeah. First, allow me to thank Ms. Mahra Al-Mutawi, the Director of the Regional Center for Educational Planning, and the team of the Regional Center for their great effort in bringing the specialists together to highlight specific areas related to the quality of teaching and learning. And this subject is a close subject to all of our hearts, actually, dealing with people with determination, what we call them here in the United Arab Emirates, or people with disabilities. It's important. And as you know, colleagues, this special category was really affected with the COVID, and this is, I believe, it applies in any other crisis, as Mahra mentioned. So this is an example that we will discuss with you together. We split the presentation between Dr. Muhammad Al-Rashaidi and myself. I'll start talking about the introduction, methodology, a few results, and Dr. Al-Rashaidi will dig deeper on the recommendation, results, and the conclusion of our study. Our study was titled Intervention on Policies Level to Ensure the Continuous Learning of Special Needs Students During Emergencies. And just to highlight also that Professor Ghanem is a member with us on this study. So he's moderating the session, yes, but he played a huge role in this paper. We will be covering, as I said, introduction, research focus and objective, methodology that we follow, results, and conclusion. As you know, colleagues, like crisis by itself, it's create an issue for typical students. Imagine the impact on our beloved students with disabilities and their family, and the special educator who are dealing with them. Our main purpose by the end to guarantee the high quality of education and to guarantee equity between in providing the right services for our students. And I believe, as you know, also that this is aligned with the SDG for the education, which is focusing on providing and ensuring that providing equity for all people in the education, which is important. Effective policy will help us to create inclusive learning environment, both supporting our students based on their abilities and need, providing necessary resources that supporting them. Myself, I'm a believer on having proper policies and procedures which guide our work. If we don't have those policies and implement it in a right and effective way, I'm sure it will impact our work in general. So the interventions are essential for promoting equity, as I mentioned, education, fostering social inclusion, in which during crisis, the crisis that we faced, pandemic, COVID-19, or any other crisis, I'm sure the social skills will be hugely affected, mainly for our children or students with disability. So if we want to achieve their maximum potential, I think we have to provide a proper policy based on the experience that we faced during those 2 years or 3 years that we lived and benefit from the lessons and the studies that we conducted. Again, it's affecting all the people, including the vulnerable groups, people of determination, or people with disability. So it's impact all of them in a negative way. And unfortunately, you were aware of this, that the impact is still there. The gap that we had during these 3 years still affecting our students. UNICEF in 2022, they mentioned that children with disability are among the most vulnerable, stigmatized, and marginalized group worldwide in the presence or absence of the pandemic in all types of the pandemic. So we need to understand how we can support them in the right, taking in consideration that they in few countries, I will not generalize, they were having an issue before the pandemic. So imagine the situation how it was with the pandemic. I think it was more more serious for this category. So the research focus and objective was highlighting mainly the reports that produced country experience policies regarding the students with special needs during the COVID-19 pandemic. We cover specific period and we cover specific research papers. Examine teacher practices in distance learning for individual disability and their utilization of technology tool and educational platform. Yes, COVID was a serious crisis and pandemic for us, but we learned a lot during this period. Our methodology approach that we follow a desktop analysis approach in which we analyze literature review during the period of 2019 to 2022. We go through those different research reports, country experience, policies, and practice outcome related to the status of special needs students during the pandemic or during the COVID-19 period. Our data source was PsycInfo, Web of Science, ProQuest, EBSCOhost during the period of 2019 to 2022. We highlighted those database mainly during this period, and we use the main keyword for us were COVID-19 pandemic and special needs, school closure, virtual teaching for students with disability, technology tool for teaching during the COVID-19. So from those keywords, we try to capture all areas related to people with determination during this period with the tools that used with them, with the case study, the success studies that we conducted during this period. General results, and as I mentioned, Dr. Mohammed Al-Rashadi will dig deeper on those results. The study results emphasize how the COVID pandemic has impacted students' learning outcome in the special needs education. It's not only, as I mentioned before, not only the students, their parents also, their family members, and the special educators themselves. The pandemic and related lockdown have had a significant impact on parents, teachers, and caregivers. Most of the reports affected were negative with the need to support. There is a huge demand for supporting those cases and try to work with them. Mainly colleagues during that period, you know that a lot of employers, they terminated or they reduced the number of the worker in their companies. So this is additional economy impact on the family, which I'm sure also impacting the students and their educational journey. I'll stop here, so I'll give a chance to Dr. Mohammed to discuss more about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatiha. A very helpful and informative introduction. Yes, go ahead, please.
The presentation, or you will share from your side. I'll keep it for you.
You can keep it, Dr. Mohammed, and just you can. Okay,
thank you, Dr. Fatiha. Again, it was a clear and informative introduction, summarized the aim and the background of this study and investigation. Now we are moving to Dr. Mohammed Al-Rashadi to add more details about the findings and the challenges we found in this research. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you again, actually, in this important session about presenting this important study, actually, that missing like students with special needs, and you know how they are suffering, with emergency and without emergency. We hope that to provide valuable information and valuable results as well. So I will now continue from where Dr. Mohammed left off by discussing the most significant findings and conclusions for this study. So as you can see here in this slide, or in this like challenges like that we have found by conducting the desktop study, meaning that referring for previous study, recent study that conducted about the challenges faced by special needs or in the field of special education regarding their needs. So as I mentioned earlier, that for years rural schools have struggled to provide the necessary resources for students with special needs. And if we look for the pandemic, actually, and we have mentioned the pandemic in this study, as if we look for the COVID-19, actually, after that and during the pandemic was many publications were published and presented about this topic. So most of our examples will be about the pandemic. So as well, so the rural areas as well, like or the students with the special needs often requires specific learning environment. So the lack of a proper technology infrastructure in rural areas during the pandemic significantly impacted their access to education. And if we look here, actually, we need to ensure that efforts to address educational gaps don't leave rural schools behind. And this is actually is very important. Next slide, Dr. Mohammed. Yes. As well, continue speaking about the challenges faced by special needs as well. So here we are talking about that students with special needs face various or lots of challenges, including health, academic, behavioral, as well physical limitations. And if we look for these limitations, we can say that these limitations need specialized equipment like access to virtual environments and technology during the crisis. And that was a lesson actually that was learned and highlighted by the pandemic. Yeah. So, however, the confinement to small areas during the pandemic has hindered their ability, I mean, the students with a special need, to effectively resume the learning. And this is actually the transition to learning from home and the learning requirements that the teaching could be done by the technology and different devices. This is as well another challenges was done and highlighted when we reviewed the literature. Next, Dr. Mohammed, yes, please. Yeah. So many families as well, it wasn't affected only on the special needs or the students with a special need or people with disability only. As well, yeah, we have to consider their family. So many families have struggled to access the devices and the internet necessary for the online learning due to economic challenges brought about the pandemic, for example, and the increased burden of parental responsibilities has resulted in insufficient monitoring and support for children with disability during the period of the online learning. So as a consequence or as a result, students have experienced educational losses and regression, in fact, in their skills due to reduced learning time and inadequate monitoring during the virtual learning period. If you go, Dr. Mohammed, for next slide for the policy, no, the next one, policy intervention and interview. And here actually we have highlighted that the policy intervention emphasizes community involvement in supporting persons with disability during the crisis and recognizing their heightened vulnerability. And this is calls for legislative adjustment, aligning specifically with the UN Convention or United Nations Conventions on the right of persons with disability, by the way. Ensuring inclusion is emergency plans, in fact. As well, the implementation of e-inclusion is recommended to facilitate remote teaching and remove barriers to learning. On the other hand, support for teachers, expansion of e-learning, and creation of accessible educational content are proposed measures to enhance educational accessibility for students with a special need or with disability. If we go to the next slide as well, this is the importance of inclusive policies and practices. So inclusive policies and practices are essential for ensuring equitable education. For example, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, accommodates diverse learning needs while guaranteeing equitable access to resources, ensures all students have necessary support. As well, collaborative planning involving stakeholders fosters inclusive policy development. On the other hand, regular assessments ensure educational practices effectively meet the needs of special needs students. Additionally, fostering community and peer support promotes peer learning and social inclusion. And I think this is very important when we are talking about the inclusion. We have to take the whole picture socially, in the behavior, on the academic, and to take as well another key players like the parents, the family, and the infrastructure in general. And just here we want to highlight as on the case study here. So we have reviewed like more than 50 studies actually by reviewing them and highlighting on their methodology, their conclusions, and their results. Just I want to share this study as a case study. For example, in this study that was conducted by Frederick 2020, introduced a model, and this model aimed at supporting special education students across diverse locations, focusing on skill retention during the pandemic through data-informed interventions and collaborations between the parents and teachers. In their results, technology tools have played a vital role in maintaining educational continuity, facilitating connections between teachers and the students, and providing, finally, remedial sessions. Video conferencing also technologies, including whiteboards, for example, screen recording tools, have enabled educators to cater to diverse students' needs effectively. And on the other hand, emotional connection and support from special education professionals have been crucial during the school closures, with regular communications and adapting teaching strategy that help those students actually to overcome these challenges. And in the next slide, as you can see, the challenges to inclusion as well. This is was like main finding based on reviewing the literature regarding the crisis and emergency. Challenges to inclusion in remote learning include limited access to adaptive technology tailored to specific needs, variability in digital skills among students, educators, and caregivers, difficulties in maintaining engagement and motivation without physical classroom interaction, and the need to adapt assessments to ensure accessibility and fairness in virtual environment. And in the next slide as well, policy recommendations for continuous learning. And here we can say that to support continuous learning, policymakers should prioritize the development of inclusive policies. This is, I think, very critical and necessary. Incorporating specific strategies for students with special needs into emergency response plans. This is, I think, related to the planning for the future and before something suddenly happens. Investing in accessible education technology, and this is, by the way, it's very critical, the technology, the educational technology, assistive technology tools, and technology infrastructure, and to provide the training for students, families, and educators, as was mentioned, is crucial. Additionally, enhancing teacher training in remote and inclusive teaching strategies is essential, and do not wait until something like emergency or urgent would be happen. And strengthening support networks for students, families, and educators to navigate remote learning challenges is vital. And lastly, policymakers should prioritize continuous assessment of remote learning strategies and make the necessary adaptations to support all learners effectively. And if we go to the last slide as a conclusion, we can say here as a conclusion, the pandemic's widespread impact has required the suspension of schools globally. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, it was an example. And transitioning to distance or blended learning systems posing significant challenges for students with special needs. And on the other hand, this study underscored the adverse effects of lockdowns and school closures on the learning outcomes of these students, worsened by economic strain, by the way, and increased anxiety among the families, by the way. Furthermore, the shift to remote learning has led to behavioral issues and emotional distress, emphasizing the need for comprehensive social, emotional, and behavioral support, and family members, including parents and siblings, have assumed new integral roles in the educational process during this period. And this is as a conclusion. Thank you very much. And we hope, later, as Dr. Ghanem mentioned, if there's any question, inshallah, we will try to answer. Thank you very much. Dr.
Okay,
Qais.
thank you, Drs. Fatih and Dr. Rashadi, for your inputs and for your informative conclusion and summarizing the main findings and the background of the study, and opening our eyes and attention toward very, very important issues like recommendations and other variables related to this issue or to this area. Kindly, I would like to invite our distinguished guests to give their feedback before start opening discussion, because actually I have a lot of discussions I prepare with the center to ask during this discussion. But before going to ask questions to you guys, I'd like to kindly invite Dr. Inas for around 10 minutes to give your feedback about these findings and this study. Please, Mike, yours. Go ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'll share my screen just because it was so interesting to read the paper and to think about the commonalities. And a lot of the time we assume that these challenges only happen in Global South or developing countries, and I think the commonality of the challenges that were brought by the pandemic really bring us closer as a world rather than a country dealing with it independently. So just a few things. I think with the key idea of policy, I really like this diagram, which reminds us of the interaction between the policy, which is there on the second, the pink round circle, and how the policy impacts on the concepts that we use, on the structures and the systems that exist. So it's through our policies in our different countries that we decide what we're going to do and how we're going to respond to different educational situations, and the impact on our practices as well. So I think policy is an underlying factor that impacts a lot of what exists and what we do in the different countries. It was really interesting to read the paper and how, again, when we're thinking about different contexts, we could be talking about students with disabilities or disabled students with special educational needs. If I'm thinking about my context, Scotland, we usually talk about students who require additional support for learning, which is a much wider. And then when we're thinking through an inclusive education perspective, again, we widen the net and talk about student diversity and ensuring that all the learners are able to access, participate and succeed in education. And that should apply not only during crisis, but during the whole time. And that still is a challenge, I think, internationally. We sometimes assume it's only in some countries. I'd say it's a challenge across the world, really. So just to bring us to this idea of how it's so contextual within Scotland, we don't use the concept of special education needs. We talk about additional support for learning, and we recognise that any learner may require additional support for learning at some stage. So within the policy, we think about a range of issues that could create barriers to learning. And the list I've just shared, I'm sharing a list of issues or characteristics that could create additional support, the need for additional support for learning. And you have things to do with disabilities, like learning disabilities or learning difficulties, but you have things like being bullied or being an interrupted learner. So all of these aspects we're thinking in Scotland they could mean that we might need to do something different for a group of learners. So that was interesting because as I was reading the paper, I was thinking, if we're reviewing papers from different contexts, we may be thinking about, so if you had a Scottish paper, for example, it could be talking about somebody, a child whose parents had passed away due to COVID, for example, and they may need additional support to be able to learn. So that was just I think a path. And it brings me to this idea of inclusion that we should be working towards, and it was really challenging during the pandemic. But as I said, I think it's challenging all the time. And it's this idea that we need to ensure that all learners are able to access learning. So not just physically access the school, but actually if I have, for example, in Scotland, a student who's recently moved to Scotland and doesn't speak English, they might not be able to access what's happening in a classroom. So that's a barrier to their learning. The second pillar when I'm thinking about inclusion or inclusive education is the idea of participation. And for us to think about participation, we need to have students to be able to be part of something. So for example, if we're thinking of the paper you just presented, we knew that because of, for example, being in a rural location without internet access, you might not be able to participate, but also you could have access but not feel part of it. And I think, again, you touched on this in this idea of engagement and support for students with disabilities. And the final aspect is this idea of success. And it brings us down or back to question, what is education for and what is success? Is it doing really well in English and maths? Is it being able to access a computer without having the parents to always help? So it's bringing the big question. And I think when we're thinking about students with disabilities, it's even more relevant, which is, what does successful education look like for different learners? I'm keeping an eye on my time. And the idea of at the basis of inclusive education is that this should apply to all learners. So not just a group of learners, but all. And so you've probably seen this diagram before. So it's the idea of equality, equity, and I would argue that the diagram on the right is referring to inclusive education. So we have the first one with 3 people at different heights standing behind a fence, and one of them is not able to see anything. They all have the same level of support. We move to the idea of equity, and the idea is that we give different levels of support to the different students. When I'm thinking about inclusive education, and COVID, I think, really brought that to light, is this idea of us looking into the context and thinking, what are the barriers? And moving from trying to fix individual students, trying to see what's wrong and how we can solve it, but thinking about our educational context and how we can remove those barriers to learning. And I think COVID brought a lot of that to light. So I'll just give you an example. In Scotland, one of our big concerns was that children coming to school, for some children, that's their only warm meal in a cold country that they may have during a whole day. And so with schools closing, there was a lot of concern in terms of nutrition and poverty and how that would impact. So it wasn't just about the learning, it was about well-being in general terms, which I think, again, you touched upon in your paper. I'll stop my sharing and I'll just tell you, as I was thinking about what you presented in the paper, I kept thinking technology can have a huge role in supporting inclusion, not just during pandemics and crisis, but in general. and that doesn't necessarily need to be computers and internet. Again, you've, I think, identified examples of communities where radio and television was used, and that can be a lot more inclusive in terms of not requiring people to have a computer. What I would challenge us to think is that technology to support inclusion, we should be really thinking about it not only during emergencies, not only in the global south or developing countries, because really we could and should be using it widely, and not only for students who are classified as having special education needs, but the focus should really be on the challenges or the barriers to access, participation, and success for all learners in our education systems. For this to happen, I think the challenge, and again, you brought it up and you pointed it out very clearly in the paper, is this idea of education beyond schooling, is the need to work with communities to collaborate with multiple stakeholders. So education stops being just about the teacher and the learner, but it starts being about the families, the brothers and sisters, the wider community. And I think for us to really develop inclusive education systems, we need to develop policies and practices that think about learning communities beyond schools and value what different people will have to bring to the education. And that's me in 9 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for using the time in proper way. 10 minutes exactly. Thank you so much. I will not give too much comment now, because what you mentioned already will be included in my questions later, but I like the way you align and connect between the things in our mind and what to make it reality, and what are the variables and components help really to make things in the reality, and move from only make policies to practices and to apply in the reality, and also regardless of the names or the titles or the terms we use to describe these people. Thank you, Dr. Inas. Very interesting points. We'll back to you very soon. I would like now to give the mic to Professor Muayyad Al-Hamidi to give his feedback also in the coming 10 minutes. Dr. Muayyad, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Prof, for the invitation, and I would like to extend my thanks for the Regional Center for Educational Planning for this really a great opportunity to talk about a very important subject. I'm trying to share my presentation.
Yes, please.
I think that's fine, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, again, thank you for the invitation. And I assume that actually children with special needs, they really face challenges, many challenges in normal condition, not only in crisis or abnormal conditions. And it is really a very great subject to talk about. I've gone through the paper, and it is amazing paper. Actually, it is very important. It is very important for the stakeholders, for the policymakers, for the students, even for the parents. So I'm sure that it was really planned in a very well manner. So briefly, I know that my presentation wouldn't exceed 10 minutes. So briefly, I will go about just a quick feedback. I might go for some suggestions And maybe if I have time, I might go for some the information or transformative technology in special education, which is very important, this subject. And I might end up with future research. So I feel that this would cover the objective of this session. So let me give just a feedback on the paper. This paper actually provides the researchers, they managed really to provide a comprehensive overview of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, not only COVID. When we are talking about any crisis, current changes that that's been happening right now, you know. So on students with special needs, the challenges they face during remote learning, the researchers actually, they employed a desktop analysis successfully and professionally and focus on students with disabilities. And over the research reports countries' experience, even policies, practice outcomes are related related to the status of special needs students during the pandemic. The paper actually as well, the results emphasize the negative impact actually, and the paper provides implications and recommendations, this is a very important part, and we should highlight, and we would go further for implementation process for this paper. And I do for implementation part of the results of this paper. It is very, as I told you, it's very important for policymakers and governments to support students with emergencies. Also, it emphasizes the importance of addressing the educational, social, and communication needs of people with disabilities in crisis plan. Suggest as well some of the educational strategies to help and to support. Let me say, overall, the paper provides valuable insights into the challenges faced by students with special needs during emergencies, not only the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, it offers recommendation for supporting their continuous learning and well-being. Let me just briefly talk about some practical suggestions. Sorry. Okay, let me talk about the practical suggestions for intervention at the policies level to ensure some kind of continuous learning of special needs students during emergencies by implementing these practical suggestions. Educational institution and policymaker can effectively perform some kind of, let me say, at the policy level to ensure the continuous learning. Legalization is very important in this part. As I told you, even in the normal condition, I've been in the field. I've been in within the teachers in the field of education, and I know this thing, it needs some kind to take a step with legalization and rules regulation to handle this matter in a way. So let's talk about develop and implement a specific emergency plan. This is very important. I think this is when we are talking about this subject, work with educational policymakers and stakeholders to develop and implement emergency plans that specifically address the needs of special needs students, not only for continuous learning, even for assistive services. The students with the special needs, the people with the special needs, they do need speech therapy, they do need occupational therapy, and many other services. So these plans should outline a clear procedure for ensuring their safety and continuous learning during various types of emergency. Another thing we might go for providing specialized training for educators. This is a very important point as well. You know, there is a transformative, transformation stage in special education. Every day we look for a new suggestions in information technology application. You know, the artificial intelligence right now, virtual. Let's talk about VR. All of these things actually should be employed in a way to help those people and make this process easier. Without technology, actually, it is the matter is really very subject, as I told you, because students with the special needs, more challenges and bigger challenges even when we are talking about this, like we are talking about normal students. I don't want really to go for, I have maybe 2 or 3 minutes, Doctor, 1 minute only. Okay. So I'll keep this practical. I might share with you later on. Even I wanted to talk about education, about educational technology, and I ended my presentation with further studies that I do recommend for you guys to go ahead and to go for research for these areas. Don't stop on this paper. It is amazing paper. Thank you, Prof. Ghanem, Dr. Rufteha, Dr. Rashida. Thank you very much for this valuable paper. And I'm sorry if I get more time, Prof. Ghanem. I know you are punctual on your timing.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you, Professor Muayyad. Very, very interesting ideas. And by the way, the last point will be asked about, so keep it in your mind to answer one of my questions exactly about these recommendations. Thank you, Dr. Professor Muayyad, sharing us your
I will stop my sharing.
feedback. Thank you. Let us now kindly continue our journey, and we start from Scotland and go to Jordan. Now let us arrive Malaysia with our distinguished guest, Dr. Law. Please, floor is yours, and please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Prof. Chairperson, esteemed panel speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is the slide that I'm going to share. I hope you can see from the screen here. If you cannot see from the advancement of the slides, then please.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Please give me a note. Okay. So today's topic is very imperative because we are living in the era of post-pandemic, where everyone has gone through a very serious pandemic due to COVID-19. Okay. So to just very quickly bring the audience through with the feedback on the paper. Firstly, I can see that this paper is generally, it's a very good paper which has detailed out very clearly on the impact of lockdown and also the pandemic on special education in developing countries. I guess the articles collected was mostly on developing countries, although I don't deny that there may be happenings or similar happenings that is also encountered in other parts of the world which are not under the developing countries. Okay, and for me, I can see that specifically the paper has dwelt further on the impact of the pandemic on learners' capabilities, learners' adaptation, mental health, and also home support system. Okay, so we can see that these issues and negative impacts serve as good sources of problem statement that may warrant for more comprehensive studies. Because in order to do more of future studies or further studies, we actually need to see what are actually the problems that is faced by the students and also the stakeholders. Okay, so perhaps I would like to share something which is also commonly happen in Malaysia, because as I read through those challenges faced by students from other countries, it also struck me that in the Malaysian context, we also face similar challenges, okay, so by the students, okay, of course, with the mainstream students and also with the students with special needs. So basically, the internet coverage and connectivity was the main issue in online teaching and learning. Although statistics show that 90% of Malaysian households have access to the internet, okay, 49% of students reported that their internet connections were poor. This is a picture that came up in the news, in the media. I suppose most Malaysians have seen this, but I think maybe not those from overseas. Okay, so this is a picture showing a girl. She's from the mainstream. Okay. Okay. And it was reported that one of the students from the university located in Sabah, okay, so this is from East Malaysia, and this girl had to climb on the treetops to get access to the internet, okay, just to sit for the online examination. Oh, okay. Okay. Other challenges related to students with special needs, okay, during the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, okay, when there was total lockdown, okay, Malaysian educators conducted classes via online learning. Okay, it was found that many students with special needs could not sit for a long time in front of the computer during the online learning. And parents too had hard time managing their child with special needs during online learning at home. And what more, if parents, if they are working from home, some teachers did feedback to us that they had to arrange online classes at night, okay, due to limited technological devices possessed in some families, because the parents also working from home, they need to use the gadgets and devices. So the classes for the child will have to be arranged online at night. What more to that, in the situation where the SOP, the standard operating procedure, had to be observed by the students, the teacher also feedback that the mask wearing was also a challenge for children with special needs. Either these children got wet frequently, got the mask wet frequently due to saliva drooling, or the child just chucked the mask away. So this was also something faced by the teachers in the classroom. Okay, so let me share further feedback on the paper. It was found that most literature on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic seems to be very negative. As I read through the paper has highlighted so many issues. So it seems to me like this is very negative. So having said that, perhaps more in-depth case study and phenomenological study can be conducted, by other researchers. And also more researchers should also conduct research on the positive impact of COVID-19, as well as the strategies used to resolve the negative impact and strategies to inculcate positiveness. Somehow we can see that there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems happening, okay, but we also want to know from the literature, like how this negative impact being resolved, and then how, if they do have some positive examples, and how do they inculcate positiveness among the students and also the teachers and caregivers. Nevertheless, the paper did shed some light on the importance of education support model, and then you talk about the use of technologies, emotion connection, as well as the e-inclusion. I purposely highlight it in red color because this is something very important, and also, it's very timely. In addition, the presenter also suggests few policy recommendations for continuous learning. Overall, I find that this paper is very informative and resourceful for the stakeholders in taking further action. Okay, maybe I would like to share some of the challenges addressed by Malaysian teachers in the Malaysian context. As you know, some of the rural area in Malaysia has constraint in accessing to internet. Okay, so in some rural area where internet access was a challenge, Malaysian educators prepared home-based teaching and learning module for different subjects or the courses. Okay, so this is one example of a module prepared to be utilized at home, and this is on one subject on manipulative skills. And then the parents will be invited to the school to obtain the modules and to execute them with their child with special needs at home. In the case where the parents were unable to make it to the school to get the module, the teachers went to their homes and passed the modules to the parents. Also, it was found that Zoom, Google Meet, and Google Classroom were commonly used by Malaysian teachers, especially Google Classroom. Okay, they deposited a lot of materials in there, and then the students can access the materials from home. For students with hearing impairment, and for the purpose of lip reading, okay, the teachers wore the plastic shield instead of a mask. So the plastic shield is a transparent one that is to replace the mask, so that the student with hearing impairment can learn through reading. For students with learning disabilities, with the initiative of some NGOs, okay, some parents and caregivers were being shared on using adaptive activities with their child at home. Okay, allow me to share some effective use of technology to support students with special needs. Okay, effective use of technology calls for the following few elements. Firstly, teachers and caregivers have to incorporate activities focusing on personalized learning experiences. Okay, so via the platform, okay, they may be given some tasks and the students are able to search for materials, and perhaps if the platform equipped with some tutoring or mentoring modules or procedures to help the student. As learners display different learning styles, the activities which to be done online, okay, should be developed to accommodate the diverse learning styles of the students. Also, we notice that the pacing of the activities are very important when they are doing online activities. This has to be figured out because the screen time has to be considered. And the activities should also promote engagement through interactive multimedia. Okay, the teacher utilized gamified learning, fostering a positive and inclusive learning environment. So we can see that based on the continuous support for students with special needs, okay, we can see that on the policy level, okay, the policy of no child left behind and the principle of education for all should be always upheld so that students with special needs have access to education even during emergencies such as the pandemic. The education and support provided have to ensure holistic learning of the child with special needs. And also, of course, the enablers, which are the surrounding people and also the environment, have to be supportive of the child in terms of learning. So here are some further recommendations. As we know that in special education, previously it started off with medical model of disability, where the focus is on the disabled person. Okay, subsequently, the society have moved towards adopting the social model of disability. I think this is also mentioned in the literature or in the article presented. Okay, and then the problem here is more on the world, okay, focusing on the social context. And I think that by now, with the pandemic, we should be more emphasizing on biopsychosocial model. Okay, so this should be, I think, especially Malaysia, country like Malaysia, or even most other countries, we should be more looking into the biopsychosocial model that comprises not just the social, of course, not just the biological, not just the social, but also the psychological aspect. And this will make up the whole well-being of the learners. So in order to overcome barriers for students with special needs, we can see that different stakeholders have to come in to play their role. Firstly, on the policy level. Okay, on the policy level, the government has to implement the policies and perhaps to develop guidelines for online or hybrid learning for students with special needs. We may have it for the mainstream, but for students with special needs, we need one very structured guideline. And institutions like schools and universities should develop alternative ways like adaptive activities and so on for teaching and learning. Family have to always communicate closely with the school, and of course, industry like the telco company have to assist in the internet provision, connectivity, and access. Okay, so in a nutshell, we can see that learners with special needs during emergencies have to be ensured with these few things. Okay, firstly, of course, is holistic development. The second is technological accessibility. And of course, the very much important is the mental health, not just on the learners, but also the teachers, parents, and the caregivers. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. Highly appreciated, very informative. Dr. Law, and include a lot of things need long time actually to focus and to discuss them. But anyway, thank you so much. I will keep enough and fair time to all of you to answer my questions, and then I will move to select some questions from the participants. Actually, I am happy that we have more than 200 participants join us today. Okay, thank you, my distinguished guests and the speakers. So allow me to start quickly, go to these questions, and I would like kindly to start with Dr. Inas about what she mentioned, speaking about the importance of policies and framing actions and activities, etc. In conclusion, Dr. Inas, how we can or how can the educational institutions, okay, and policymakers address the challenges faced by students in special or with special needs in adding to remote learning? How can these agencies or organizations do what they can do?
Thank you so much for I think a very, very relevant question. It's so interesting because I think what we did during the pandemic was something that we have been saying for many years. It's not possible. So if you have a child in a hospital, we cannot go physically to a school building. We kept saying, oh, we'll try our best, but we might not be able to guarantee. And we weren't using technology. I mean, obviously there are exceptions and very good exceptions. And so I think that the idea that during a crisis, everyone was scared, worried, doing their best, wearing masks, and we still managed to adapt and to create very imaginative responses. And it's a shame that we then go back to the comfortable way that we've always done education. So I think we really need to look back to the really good practices that happened during the pandemic and think, how can we build these into policies and into practices, regular practices of day-to-day work in schools? And I think that would be so important and make a big difference for
Sure.
a lot of learners.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Inas. Since we are talking about the importance of policies, and as Dr. Fatiha mentioned, to the importance of early intervention and the importance of practices, more than only just make and create more policies, etc. Considering many variables like the economic, the social crisis, etc. From your point of view, Dr. Fatiha, how we can align between all these practical level, theoretical level, considering the economic, social crisis and variables related, and may affect, of course, the implementation of this e-learning or dealing with crisis? Please.
Thank you, Rohan. This is a great question also. Actually, the dream to have our students with disabilities part of our community. We need to have them and to provide them with the quality of education like we provide our activities. So this is the ultimate goal that we are looking for, and I hope we will be able to achieve this in a time. But we need, as educators, as stakeholders, as educational institutions, to work proactively to avoid any issue. I believe training is an important, not only for special educators or teachers, even for parents, for stakeholders, for other people involved with the teaching and learning process. I remember we had a great plan when we worked on the transition of few students from special needs centers to the schools. We train all stakeholders with that plan to empower them and to give them the right competencies so they will be able to handle any challenges. I think in enhancing the technology is an important, again, proactive. I'll say this several times, proactive strategies that is important to solve any issue, regardless of the economic situation that we are facing. I know that there is a lot of variation between countries and the way of dealing with the people of determination. But again, if there is a proper planning, if there is a strategies that we built from the beginning, I'm sure a lot of issues will be solved. Adopting frameworks, Dr. Muhammad mentioned the universal design of learning, response to intervention, all multi-tier support system. All these are great frameworks that can help us to work in a proactive way to avoid variation.
Yes, great. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Yes, you mentioned a lot of important issues actually, including technology, and this part will lead me to ask Dr. Chung about the issues of technology and the purpose of using technology and the challenges we face in using technology. Lead us to consider what Dr. Fatiha mentioned, the economic, the level of the people, where they live, what exactly their needs, what kind of training or support or resources they need. What do you advise, okay, in this matter, these developmental countries to do in order to respond to these different parents, family background, etc., especially when we talk about technology, as well as teachers and some schools, please?
All right, thank you, Prof, again for the question. This is a very pertinent question. Okay, so basically, I can see that teachers training not just have to train the normal pedagogical knowledge, but nowadays we're talking about TPEC, technological and pedagogical content knowledge. So the technological literacy or digital literacy have to come in, okay, to in the teachers training. So we cannot run away from that for teachers training. As for the students, even like now in the universities, I think the students have to be trained for future readiness. So we are talking about 21st century skill. Again, the digital literacy cannot be run away. And apart from that was all other critical thinking skills, the 4 C's, critical thinking, creativity, collaborative, and communication skills. Okay, so this is for the students. And as for the parents, I can see that parents, of course, is a group that I think, but nowadays the young parents, they're also quite techno-savvy. So we don't deny that the parents are picking up, and of course, there must also be training regularly for maybe the older parents in order for them to adjust and adapt to the technological usage. Other than that, I can see that the telco company, as I mentioned earlier, has to come in actually to assist very much in providing a more sustainable kind of connectivity, because in Malaysia, like for example, developing, we are in the advanced developing country, so we need so much on the involvement of private sector, okay, such as the telco, to come in and assist us. So during the pandemic, they did provide us with the extra bandwidth and so on, so that we can connect the internet more smoothly, more efficiently. So I guess that's now for the time being. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Chung. Very important points to consider. Agree totally with you. And since we talk about, again, building or bridge the gap between the public and private sector in the communities, in the societies in different countries, I would like to ask Dr. Rashidi about the importance of collaboration between the national, regional, international, educational stakeholders. As you know, this kind of collaboration absolutely help in building more initiatives and improve innovations to increase the awareness, the education. Would you please give us some hints about how can these national, regional, international build and improve the collaboration, innovation?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ghanem, to mention this an important actually aspect. Yeah, when we are talking about communication and collaboration, yeah, between the stakeholders. In fact, this is an important step for the planning for the future as a proactive approach, as Dr. Fatiha mentioned, actually. So when they are collaborated together, I mean stakeholders, even on the national or international, this is the first one as a proactive approach. On the other hand, it's important, when we have collaboration between professionals as well, this will lead for the successful outcomes, and we have ready plan to avoid any critical issue would be happen for the students with disability, and so on. And I think this will improve the outcomes, increase the efficiency as well, and enhance learning and development, and lead to sharing ideas and experiences between different people or different stakeholders to planning as well for the future.
Yes, great. Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Well, actually, all answers actually related to the study and related also to the literature, and of course the issues everywhere in all countries. Okay, one of the main issues or outcomes, the challenges we face actually in different countries. Okay, and one of the most important challenges, in addition to technology, resources, Parents important, families important, and in this study, there were like some results outline the awareness and the curiosity and the obstacles may face by the parents. The question here to Professor Muayyad about how important to develop actions, okay, and responses to support caregivers, parents, families during this pandemic or any other or similar crisis. Please, Professor Muayyad.
Thank you, Prof. Ghanem. Actually, it is a very important issue. You know, parents, especially with early intervention, they have a big role, and to have them being in a team for creating some kind of solutions for this matter is very important. So it is very important. We can engage them through, now with the new technology for the students with the special needs, there are some kind of certain even in giving a big role in educating their children. So for sure, when the teacher is aware about the new technology and how to employ it with the parents, how to engage the parents, this is a very important issue. And it was from the biggest challenges that we faced during teaching children with special needs in schools, that the parents, they are aware of that part. So I'm sure that when we engage them, when we educate the teachers how to employ and how to encourage the parents to be a part of this, and I'm sure that the parents welcome that when they feel that they have a role in it, and there is like a planned matter for education for their children, not just plans or something like this. So
yes, thank you, Professor Muayyad. Yes, I agree totally with you. I would like also to ask some or more questions, but I will go to the questions and answers file here, box here in this link. Let me okay, one of the interesting questions about again teachers, and by the way, these questions in Arabic, so allow me to read in Arabic and then I will quickly translate. من أجل تعزيز سياسات وضمان التعليم للجيد الطلبة ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة، هل يتم التفكير في تأهيل معلمين متخصصين ومناهج خاصة لهذه الفئة قبل إدماجهم في المدارس، لأن الأمر يتم بشكل غير مخطط له؟ Which is simply the question asked about in order to improve and to support, to sustain the policies and to sustain the quality of good teaching for these people with special needs. Is there any initiatives about preparing more specialized teachers and how we can integrate and help them to participate in the schools? Is there any plans, or what do you suggest to enhance this area? So I think Dr. Inas, what do you like? Do you like to answer this question, please?
Yes, I think again, thank you. And yes, teachers are definitely at the core of these changes that we're talking about. They need to be empowered. They need to be prepared. Within Scotland, I'd say probably within Portugal as well, the idea is that the mainstream teacher is responsible for all learners in their classroom, and that special education teachers or teachers with specialisms are there to support the mainstream teacher to develop as an inclusive teacher. For that, we really need to take this seriously, and it needs to be embedded into teacher education. So not just to form a small group of teachers who will then be seen as, you'll come and fix the problem, take the child away and then fix them and bring them back, but really to say, can we collaborate? So it's going back to that collaboration. Can we work together? We all need to know the basics, but we also know that student diversity is more and more existence in our classrooms. And so the idea that somebody will be able to know everything about all disabilities or all aspects of diversity is really impossible. So the idea that we know the basics, but we need to be able to go and identify partners who will be specialists, help us with the different things is really important.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dr. Inas. Very interesting question here I got. How can policymakers effectively measure the success and impact of policy interventions aimed at supporting special needs students during emergencies, and what indicators should be considered? I think this is a very good question from Muhammad Hawamdi. Yes, colleagues, anyone like to answer this question? Dr. Fatiha, maybe. Yes, please.
I'll go through some of those.
Yes, quickly.
And then my colleagues can add more. Actually, measuring the success and identifying the criteria will depend on few factors that we have always to put in our consideration. Do we have a framework? Do we have a policy? Do we have procedures? Recently, ADIC, they announced their ADIC, which is the Abu Dhabi Education and Knowledge Department, which is in charge on the educational system in Abu Dhabi, Emirates of Abu Dhabi. They released a new policy for inclusion, which encourage schools to have their policies, their vision, their mission, their standards, their implementation plans. So if I don't have a clear objectives, clear goals, clear KPIs, a clear baseline or data to measure, so I will not be able to measure myself. But maybe those some indicators that I can help to build my or to measure my success. A lot of criteria that I can put in my mind, similar to access to education. What is the accessibility? Is my building or school really accessible for people with determination or no? How much they are engaged with the activities and participated. Unfortunately, still we have an issue with that, including them with our activities and our teaching and learning. The learning outcome, how much is really tackling all the needs of all learners in my class. Parents' involvement and teacher feedback again is an important indicator to measure the success. There is like a lot of those points that we can. I think maybe this need a separate workshop by itself.
Yes, right. Agree with you. Actually, I wish that I have more time to expand the discussion and ask colleagues here, distinguished guests, about their opinion. I'd like quickly, before closing the discussion, as the time almost done, that what you all mentioned, highly appreciated, and as Dr. Fatiha closed, that yes, without having clear and well planned actually at both levels, long-term and short-term, considering all the stakeholders and all the partners actually, in order to improve the collaboration. Without having clear and good and strong practices like what Dr. Rashada mentioned, universal design, collaboration, collaborative community support, policy awareness, as Dr. also Inas mentioned, teachers are the important. As Dr. also Chung mentioned, the importance of being aware and work together, support each other, and consider the importance of resources. All are important, as also Dr. Muayyad mentioned. Thinking about the more research, because we cannot reach or improve any area without research, right? We need data. We need to gain more and collect more data to understand how these people think, what exactly their needs, what are exactly their concerns, in order to put all in good plan at all levels, national, international, organization, family, school, and the country level. Thank you so much for colleagues, guests, for really this highly appreciated and effective discussion and feedback, and feedback about the research, about the study, and not only about the research and the study, about the importance of course, improving the area of inclusivity, inclusive education, and policies to be ready as countries, as families, as teachers, to face and to deal with any la samahallah, any needs in the future, or any difficulties or obstacles. Thank you so much again, and also thank you Regional Center, Ms. Mahra and her team, for this very effective series, actually open-minded, and add more ideas and actions for the future. Thank you for all of you guides, and thank you for our participants being patient with us, and hopefully you will get benefits, and you will find this discussion, this seminar, recorded and saved in the Regional Center website. Thank you again, and my pleasure being with you, Professor Muayyad, Dr. Chang, Dr. Rashadi, Professor Fatiha, and Dr. Inas, and Regional Center team. Thank you so much. See you on next round, inshallah, very soon. Good luck. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.